I'm Bonnie. Welcome to Tarot with Bonnie and Peter, where we take the mystery out of the tarot and help you bring this ancient practice into everyday life. In this podcast, we'll talk about life, tarot, and everything in between. So grab your tarot deck, get comfortable, and start your journey to tarot with Bonnie and Peter. Welcome to Tarot with Bonnie and Peter. I'm Bonnie, and today we have the absolute pleasure of having a good friend of mine, Naomi Simpson. So I'm going to introduce Naomi. We met actually a few months ago, but it seems like we've been friends for much longer than that. We've had so many synchronicities. We both went to the same university. We were probably there actually for a year together at the same time. So it's really beautiful to meet somebody who just aligns so beautifully with your own energy and all of the beautiful things that we bring together. So we're so excited to have you. So Naomi is a guide and a confidant for women navigating the complexities of intimate relationships and personal growth, combining a background in corporate human resources, which I have as well. So that's another synchronicity that we have. So she combines that with her coaching practitioner certification from TAC, as well as several professional astrology certifications from the CAAE. So Naomi integrates a variety of ancient spiritual practices and modern tools into her relationship coaching practice. Offering practical, grounded support, she guides clients to improve communication, deepen intimacy, enhance understanding of self and other, and live in synchronicity with natural cycles to unlock their gifts and navigate challenge with awareness and honesty. Thank you so much, Naomi, for being here.
Thank you so much, Bonnie and Peter, for having me. I'm so excited for our conversation.
So are we. So are we. Yay.
Yay.
What I love about sort of meeting a kindred spirit is that Naomi uses tarot. So she's a relationship coach, she's an astrologer, but she uses tarot for her own sort of personal guidance. So Naomi, do you want to sort of take us down memory lane and we often like to say like tarot finds us somehow. So maybe how did tarot find you? How did tarot come into your life? And then maybe like if you have a specific practice that you do daily with the cards, you can maybe let our listeners know how you use that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So I found tarot shortly after I discovered astrology, which will come as no surprise to you guys. And first I discovered astrology probably sort of, 2014, 2015. I had always had a real love affair with the night sky. And I started getting more interested in moon circles. A very good friend of Bonnie and mine, Marianne Sheldrake, who's a wonderful feng shui consultant, used to host women's circles that were synced with the new moon and the full moon. And I was part of that for many years. And so I got more and more interested, started following some astrology content on Facebook or Instagram. And then just found Jennifer Rassiopi, who's a really great astrologer in the US. She has sort of this lunar logic thing that I did that, which was really interesting. And then I was just sort of delving deeper and deeper and deeper. And I ended up, Marianne actually suggested this wonderful astrologer and tarot reader in the US, Kim McGrath. Her website is expressionsoftheuniverse.com. And I had a reading with her and it was just astounding. So she starts with your astrology and then she gives you a tarot reading. It's sort of stars and cards. And I was like just blown away and humbled by the astrology reading. And it was one of those experiences of how does this person I've never even laid eyes on before know so much about my life? And then I was really curious about the tarot, and so many of the things that the tarot was showing in our reading really came to pass fairly quickly. So it was this really interesting combination of like understanding who I was, what I'm here to do, the cycle I was in from astrology, and then enriching that with the tarot and giving me a lot more guidance around very specifics around timing and events. And it was just like, what a powerful combination. So I was totally hooked. So that was the intro. And then I was in full, I really I decided to start studying. I started studying with Deborah Silverman, who's a well-known astrologer in the US. Then I studied with Rebecca Gordon, Malika Semper. And then I discovered the Canadian Association of Astrological Education and decided to pursue my certifications through them. So that's been a really amazing, wonderful path. And then I, evolved from doing readings for friends and family into readings for clients. And then I went back to school to get my coaching certification. And in the meantime, I also was so I was on this really deep dive astrologically. Of course, like astrology, it's just such a depth and breadth of info. You can sort of never master it all. It'll be a lifelong learning. And then when I started to discover tarot, it just was adding another layer, which I really, really loved.
Yeah.
Yay.
Exactly.
So then, okay, so you discovered tarot. So then what did you do? Did you go out and buy a deck? Like, how did that practice sort of evolve for you?
So I had been, I feel like this sort of gateway drug for tarot is oracle decks.
I think this is a conversation we may have had before.
So I always joke that the gateway drug for astrology is the moon and understanding lunar cycles. Yeah. And the gateway drug for astrology is oracle decks. And I love oracle decks, and I do find them a bit light. And I have 4 planets in Scorpio, so I want to go a little bit deeper. And I'm also not afraid of the truth. And so tarot to me is much more like it just sort of cuts through the gloss. And I really appreciate that. So I think I began with some really interesting, I actually have a really interesting Kabbalah oracle deck. So that was, I think, my very first one, which I bought probably, 25 years ago or something. And so I was accumulating sort of decks here and there. And then I actually work every day with a cosmic alchemy deck that a friend of mine, Debbie Boos, who's an astrologer and human design and psychic medium in Wales. She and I study with Deborah together, and she did this deck, and I love it. And I pull a card from her deck every day. And then a friend of mine started getting really into tarot, and somebody gifted her the Allura Tarot, and it didn't speak to her, so she gifted it to me. And I love the Allura Tarot. I love Allura. Allura is a little small town about an hour and a half away from me. And it's really beautiful and charming, and it's a very magical feel there. And the deck really reflects that. And then I bought Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck. And because so many of the books I was reading were referring to Rider-Waite-Smith, and I was like, I need to have this deck so that I can understand the imagery from this deck and then sort of use it in my understanding of other decks. So those are my 3 go. Yeah.
Your 3 go-tos. Well, what's funny is Naomi and I did an exchange. So Naomi read my astrology chart, which, I had never had that done before. And I was fascinated with, I didn't understand astrology, but I was fascinated with the fact that I was a Libra and all these things. So I had this beautiful reading with Naomi. And then I did a tarot reading for Naomi. And then Naomi said, oh, let me show you, because she was talking about the Allura Tarot. So she showed me this deck, which I'd never heard of. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a beautiful deck. And I thought, oh, it's so unique. Where would I ever buy this deck? Well, that week, a few days, like literally, it was a few days later, Peter and I went to the Tarot in Lenormand conference in Kingston. And what do I see? The creator of the Allura Tarot, she had, commissioned artists to help create this deck. It's such a beautiful collection of different artwork. She was selling the Allura Tarot at the conference. I said, Peter, you're not going to believe this. So I bought the deck, but that's just a beautiful example of these synchronicities, right? You showed me this deck. You didn't have to show me the deck. And then I found that deck literally 2 days later. And this isn't a deck that you can just order or like go into a store and there's the Allura Tarot.
Now,
exactly.
I thought this story was going to go deeper because there's a particular card inside that deck. I thought you were going to go further. So
it does. It goes a little further. So then
you talk about synchronicity. I was like,
okay.
There's more. So I met Andrew McGregor for the first time at this conference, and we were talking after the conference, and I had no idea. So, okay, so that's fine. So I meet Andrew, and then at the conference, I bought the Allura Tarot, and on my own personal practice, I was pulling cards for that the next morning. As I'm pulling cards, oh, I forget which card it is, and this is terrible. I should remember, but
It's the
part
four
of
of
my
something,
reading,
I think. It's one of
was
the
it
fours.
I think it's the Four of Pentacles.
Might be the Four of Pentacles.
So I pull the card, I believe it was the Four of Pentacles, and then I look in the book because the book attributes the card to the creator, like to the artist of that card. Who is the artist of that card? It was Andrew McGregor. I'm like, what?
That's
So
wild.
not only, did I buy the deck from, the creator, I pulled a card from the person that I had met the day before, who I'd never met before, who I didn't know contributed to this deck and was part of my reading. It was insane. So,
That's wild. I guess I need to meet Andrew McGregor.
And has since become a guest. He's been a guest here already on Tarot with Bonnie and Peter. But I just thought when you're talking about synchronicity, I'm like, wait a minute, this story actually goes. It goes deeper. There's more. There's more.
Well, I can add another synchronicity around that the day. So Bonnie and I did this beautiful exchange of readings, and you used, I think it was the Lightworkers Tarot for the reading.
the Light Seers Tarot.
Light Seers Tarot. Okay, thank you. I couldn't remember what it was called. And so I'd never seen that deck before, and it was beautiful. And within about a week, maybe a week later, a client came for her coaching session, and we were chatting, and she said, "Oh, I just need to show you the tarot deck I just got." And she pulls it out, and it's the same deck. And I was like, "Oh, I just saw that." And then another friend of mine who's a tarot enthusiast, she sends me a photo of the same deck. Again, maybe 2 weeks after that. "Look at the deck I just picked up. I just love it." And I was like, wow. And I believe that the creator of that deck, again, is not far from us maybe in Bradford.
Yeah.
Chris Ann. Yeah, she's from Bradford. I don't know if she still lives in Bradford, but she is definitely local. And I was my daughter does competitive dance, and a couple of years ago, I had gone into a used book. She was at a competition in St. Catharines, and I went to a used bookstore because I'm always looking for, I'm not a big fan of buying used things, but used tarot decks or oracle cards, I don't know, they speak to me. So I went into this particular store. They didn't have any tarot decks, but I bought an oracle deck. And then I came back and I was talking to some of the parents who were there, and then we started talking about tarot. And one of the fathers, he said, "Oh, I went to high school with somebody who's really into tarot. Her name was Chris Donnelly or something like." And I'm like, "Why does that name sound so familiar?" I'm like, "Oh my God, Chris Ann." So you went to high school with her, and I was like fangirling through him, being like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you know."
Do you know who that is? I know.
That's awesome. Love it. I love that.
So it is such a small world.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I always say, Naomi, when you're talking about, I choosing from, a couple of decks in an oracle deck, be careful not to go down that path either, because sometimes it's like, oh, and this deck resonates with me. Oh, and this deck resonates with me. Oh, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. And, I think Bonnie and I probably have 100 decks between oracle and tarot decks between the two of us.
More.
Yeah, you're right. Probably. I was trying to
be. It's a bit of an addiction.
I know it can be, look, I always think like, and you said the same thing about astrology, right? The idea that there's a level of depth once you go in. And I, probably one of the, like, thank you for coming on to the podcast. When you said, I've got planets in Scorpio, I'm like, yeah, all right. Me too. 4 of them in my first house.
You are kindred spirits.
We are, right? Including, I walk around with Scorpio all the time because I literally have a scorpion that goes from my heel to the top of my knee on my left calf, like just
I love it.
Yeah, hangs from the sun because it's my rising sign. So I thought, all right, well, let's put a sun there and let's put the Scorpio on the tail, just kind of hanging off the sun. But there's depth to everything, like even just looking at the differences that artists do in a tarot deck. It can sort of help you kind of go deep.
It's so subtle, but they're really meaningful, and it can put a whole different sort of spin on a particular card and how to work with it.
Totally. Even just the approaches, like when you talk about astrology, and I think about things like, well, are you looking at astrology from a modern perspective? Are you looking at it from a psychological perspective, or is it Hellenistic? The same way with tarot, which branch are you looking at? Are you looking at the Thoth deck? Are you going, you're looking at the Marseille deck, which, we had Andrew, when Andrew was on here, did a reading with the Marseille deck, or are you looking at, the Rider-Waite-Smith or I call them clones. That's probably not quite the right the right word, but like you, I'm a big, like the Rider-Waite-Smith is kind of where I went. I think we had Liz Worth on, who was talking about the same thing. Images are 1909. I totally get it. They're absolutely dated. And we've got decks that are a better representation of sort of the modern world, but that's kind of where they come from. It's not the OG deck, but it's probably the OG deck for most of the decks that we've got.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely. I just have to make a comment about your Scorpio tattoo. I read once that Scorpio is the zodiac sign most likely to have a scorpion, a tattoo about their zodiac sign, which I think is awesome.
Well, I
love scorpions.
I take it one step further because I figure, astrology and tarot, because I studied astrology before I kind of got into the tarot. And on the on the left side of my body, I got the scorpion. On the right side of my body, I actually have tattooed the 4 suits of the tarot. So I'm always carrying, I've got astrology and tarot with me basically everywhere I go. So
I love it.
That's
my logo is the phoenix, which is again another very important symbol of the Scorpio.
Scorpion, yeah, totally.
No tattoos yet, though.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so. That's funny that you mentioned that about Scorpio, because I have a Libra tattoo and I got it when I was like in university, the same one that we went to. So I was probably 21 and I got because I resonated so much with being a Libra and not knowing that it was my sun sign. Like back in that day, I just thought I was a Libra, but I'm a Libra rising and it's my sun sign. And my tattoo is my Libra symbol inside of a sun. And I did that without even knowing. So I don't know, maybe that's in Libra too, to get a Libra tattoo. Maybe not, but
the aesthetic, you like things to look good.
I was going to say, right?
Yeah.
It's probably
decorating your body,
right? Very, very beautiful. It must be, it must have a certain appeal to it as well. So
exactly.
Well, it's old now. And when people ask you, they're like, "Oh, do you regret your tattoo?" I'm like, it'd probably look a little different now if I were to do it, but that's okay.
That's great.
So speaking of zodiac signs, Naomi, you have a relationship coaching practice, and you, from what I understand, is you use astrology to help your clients maybe understand their communication styles or sort of help within that realm. Do you want to talk a little bit about sort of how these like ancient practices, like astrology, and, we can even talk tarot later, but how those can help us deal with things like in practical everyday life?
Yeah, absolutely. So your astrology chart, your horoscope, is this blueprint of who you are, what you came here to do. And it's also a calendar that tells me a lot about the cycle of life you're in. So it's such a really wonderful tool for self-exploration, but it also gives us so much information around things like, your love language, what makes you feel safe and secure, what your communication preferences are. And so one of my favorite kinds of readings to do is a synastry reading. And that's a reading between 2 people. And it can be husband and wife, or wife and wife, or husband and husband, or parent and child, 2 friends. And I just love looking at synastry because it's so helpful. And I love when I'm working with a couple. And again, I do a lot of my coaching is more with one partner, not necessarily both. But when I do work with a couple, one of my favorite things to do is dive into the synastry of their charts, because it's so illuminating for them to say, this is what makes your partner feel safe and secure. And, we all tend to, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dr. Gary Chapman's The 5 Love Languages. It's pretty big in the zeitgeist now. And so we all speak the love language, our primary love language. We are shouting it to everybody in our lives. And they're all shouting their love language to us. But if that's not one of our love languages, we might not even be hearing it. And they're thinking like, I'm showering you with love. Like, I just don't get it. And meanwhile, I'm a acts of service person and you're a words of affirmation person. You're telling me all the time, like, how much you appreciate me and how much you value me and whatever. And I'm like doing stuff for you. And neither of us, we're just not hearing each other. And that's actually in your chart. Your moon sign tells me a lot about what makes you feel safe and secure, what comes naturally. And, I always joke, my partner has his moon in Taurus, which is a beautiful, beautiful moon, but he needs to feel physically comfortable. Like, that's such a priority for him. It's so funny. And I'm always like, oh, there's that moon in Taurus, like doesn't want to get out of the comfort zone. And when we know, like, if our different planets are having challenging conversations with somebody else, that's helpful too. So when I know like, oh, this is how, your like Venus is what we love and value. So if your Venus is in a opposition or a square with your partner's Venus, that's not necessarily a bad thing if you know and understand that. But if you don't, it can be a real blind spot. So it's really just saying, helping them, and it's also a really beautiful opening point for conversation to say, this is how they're experiencing the world. Did you know this? And helping them then have a lot more understanding. It just really opens the doors for cohesion and communication and understanding one another's needs. And then being able, you have a fighting chance of actually meeting your partner's needs. Because if you don't even know what they are, you're dead in the water.
Yeah, thank you. I love when you talk about the idea of that chart being that blueprint. But then you also talked as well, and I don't know if this is the opportunity to get into it. You also talked about it being kind of a calendar as well. So can you talk a little bit? So if you're working with a client, so that they've got the blueprint of their chart, and where something happens to sit in relationship to something else. What about that calendar piece, that timing piece, those cycles? I'm curious, to know about that. Only because from my tarot practice, that timing piece isn't part of it, and I would also look at kind of astrology as almost the timing part of tarot work. So now you've got me curious. I hope my question makes sense. So
yes, I think so. So I think actually the timing piece of astrology is one of its like most important gifts, because I always know, like I could tell you where Saturn is in the sky, what zodiac sign it's in based on who's booking readings with me. Because it's like, oh, look, it's all mutable signs booking readings with me right now. People with Saturn in a mutable sign. So it's like, oh, you're in a Saturn cycle. Or, I remember there have been many times where I've gotten on calls with clients and, I've never met them before. We're looking at their chart. And before we even start, I'll just say, I remember one in particular, I'm like, how are you doing? Because they just had so much really tough astrology going on. And the person just burst into tears and was like, oh my God, when is this going to be over? And it was really nice to be able to say, you're almost done. Right. This is when it started. Tell me what's been going on. And the other thing is the astrology is all about patterns and recognizing the pattern. And okay, so right now we're in the midst of a Venus retrograde, and Venus retrogrades are so beautiful. She goes retrograde about every 18 months. Of all the planets, she spends the least time in retrograde. So hers are very remarkable. Mars also just finished a retrograde and he goes in the least frequently, but he's there a bit longer. And Venus retrogrades over the same part of our chart every 8 years. And that's just based on the geometry of her cycle around the sun. And so we can look and say, so with people who have, I just did a reading for somebody last week who has Venus retrograde in Aries. And I'm like, oh, so right now we're in a cycle that you were born under. So this is really familiar energy for you. But the most recent time we had that cycle was March, April of 2017. So do you remember what was happening there? Most people are like, I don't know. And some people are like, yep, I know exactly what was happening. But I'm like, okay, look through your phone. Yeah, Bonnie's like, yes, I know. Look through your phone, look through old emails, look through old calendars if you have them, look through your social media posts to jog your memory about what was happening, because here you are having another revision around that. And a retrograde cycle is all about getting clearer around that. And, so you're going within, you're getting clear about what you value, what you love. And there's a new sort of layer that we're peeling now. And, that happens. The Venus retrogrades are fairly interesting ones. I mean, to me, the most important cycles are Saturn. I love the Jupiter cycles. Of course, I'm like, oh, Jupiter's coming to your ascendant. Yay. But then it's like, okay, the Jupiter cycles are nice. And it's like, okay, we're kicking off a new 12-year cycle. Right. What kind of growth do you want to experience? But the Saturn cycles, to me, when I look in retrospect in my life, yes, they might bring you to your knees. Yes, you may feel like you're not going to make it. And usually it's such a game changer. And really, so I'm always looking at like, how can I make friends with Saturn? What does Saturn want me to learn? What is Saturn in, Saturn is in Pisces right now. It's about to shift into Aries in May. What do we need to
I know
leave?
exactly where Saturn is right now. It's at 23 degrees Pisces. It's also at 23 degrees Pisces in my chart. So as of today, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no, and do you
as
have
you were talking
important
about
points
Saturn
at 23
patterns,
Pisces?
I'm like, it is literally, I think it's today, actually, the day that we're recording this, where I'm experiencing Saturn transit number 2. So,
so do you have Saturn in Pisces? Are you in a Saturn return?
Literally at my chart's to my right, it is literally at 23 degrees Pisces.
Oh, wow. Well, congratulations. You're almost about to graduate, Peter. So yay. Saturn school's almost over.
I know.
He's an old devil, but so many important lessons. And but that's powerful.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. I have, my significant other will share very little about her chart. But I'm an open book when it comes to where things sit. So sorry. And I didn't mean to, because
no, that's okay.
I interrupted a question that I was actually quite fascinated, not because I know where my Saturn sits, but just because of the idea of, of timing, because I always think that astrology and timing go so nicely together. And it is a piece that, and I know that some tarot practitioners will use a tarot deck and have timing techniques that they would attribute to a tarot deck, but there isn't something that is as, I guess, universally accepted as timing in astrology. I mean, in a lot of ways, astrology is all about timings and cycles and patterns.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love the idea of the the concept of Saturn Saturn transits and any of the transits that are there. So
yeah, I mean, it's so funny because when people talk about like, oh, you guys probably get this too, like, oh, I don't believe in that and I'm like, oh, do you celebrate your birthday? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, you're practicing astrology because what you're celebrating is your solar return, which is where the sun has come back to the same degree it was at the moment of your birth. So, you're like, it's everywhere. You can't get away from it.
Is that what your birthday means?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the sun has come back to the same place it was. And that's why I think in pop astrology, there's so much emphasis on your sun sign. And, but your sun sign is just one, it's a very important piece of the puzzle, but there's so much more. And, and you get people who are like, I'm a Leo, but I never really resonated with this. And it's like, oh, because you have a night chart and your moon is in Capricorn. Right. So you're, I can explain it. Or I love it when, one of my astrology teachers said, people really speak their charts. And so being a good listener and hearing what your clients are saying, and because I'll ask people like, how does this resonate for you? Can you relate to this? What does Libra mean for you? What does whatever sign we're talking about? And then they'll start talking about something and they'll say something that I'm like, no, that's not Taurus, but it is another part of their chart. And I'll say, okay, you said something really important. It's not part of what you were describing, but I see it in your chart and here's where it is. So, and helping just fit all the pieces of the puzzle together.
I love that too. So when Naomi and I, or even some other people get together and I'll be talking about something I'm struggling with, she's like, oh yeah, because that's in your chart. And she pulls it up in her phone and she explains it all.
I know.
I'm like, that's incredible that you can just do that so quickly. So it's such a really great tool that you can use to help you, through some of these things. And one thing I'd like to get into, if you're okay with this, Naomi, because you also are a relationship coach, and we all have issues in our relationship. Well, I like to, I'm pretty sure that's across the board. But what are some, I guess, of the key things that people struggle with in relationships, and then maybe taking that a little bit further? And is there a way that maybe we could use tarot to get some insight into what might help us through some of those challenges? I mean, obviously coming to see a relationship coach is the best way to go because you're getting a lot more information, but sometimes we just need help in those moments of like, oh, why am I struggling? Or what can I do to help me? So maybe you can shed some light on that for us and see, really, sort of scratch the surface of how we can navigate that if we're experiencing some challenges.
Yeah, that's a great question and a great way to use tarot. And, I would say, so when you said like, oh, what are some of the issues? Well, how long do we have? There are lots of,
True.
but, ultimately, I think what most relationship disconnect comes down to is, as humans, we all have the same fundamental needs. And we all have different ways of getting those needs met. And I may not enjoy the strategy you are employing to get your needs met. And that's where we have the disconnect. And so, I think it's it's communication. And I think a lot of people are really disconnected from their needs, particularly women. So part of it is getting clear on, what are your non-negotiables? What is really important to you? What do you want to experience in your relationships? And this is not just for your romantic, most important intimate partnership. This is in all of our relationships, our friendships, our relationships with our kids, our relationships at work with our colleagues. So it really transcends all relationship boundaries. And to me, a great way to use the tarot would be to explore, and I've done this where I've had been at a bit of a stalemate with somebody. And so I'll pull out my decks and say, because I want to know what's the next right step I need to take with this person. So what's the best approach here? What energy do I need to work with this person? And so it could be, seeing what, how do I need to communicate with them? Or it could, maybe the guidance I get is, leave it for now. It's not the right time. Just don't make this story about you. This is their story. Let them do what they need to do and revisit. Just let the dust settle and revisit. So that would be sort of how I might approach it. But it's also, it could be, you could use it in a really fun, playful way with two people to be like, okay, what's the biggest challenge in your relationship, and pull and see what the tarot has to say, right? So I think there's lots of possibilities there.
Yeah, I love that. And I think if you are working with a partner and you're both willing to pull cards together to see what comes up, that's such a really great way for the both of you to communicate. I often over my years of using tarot, there's a lot of relationship spreads about what does this person think about me or what? And I'm like, nah, that's kind of peeking into their business. It's kind of not your business to know what they think about you, but what the both of you can do to improve that relationship or how you communicate. But a great way to do that would be if both parties are willing to sit down and be like, what's my greatest challenge, or how can I communicate better with your what you need from me. So I'm going to do that with Steve. Although, he's not a tarot reader, but he's very open to having, I read for him all the time. And I think that's a really wonderful way for partners, or friends even, or parents, right? Parent-child relationship, to be open to being like, okay, let's see what comes up. Let's be honest about this, but doing it in a supportive way of gaining information. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a great way. To me, it's just it's a fun icebreaker, and you brought up something I think is really important to address, which is we don't use these tools to get into somebody else's business. So I've had clients reach out to book a reading, and then they're like, oh, can you check this other person's chart and see how their chart works with me? And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, if you'd like to book a synastry reading for the two of you, no problem. I just need to hear from both of you for the consent. And then it's like, oh, no. This is just a person I met online and I just want, and it's like, yeah, no, that's not ethical. And so again, if somebody, and I agree with from tarot, I don't need to know what the other person is thinking.
Right.
That's not useful. I want to stay in my lane. If I want to know what somebody else is thinking, I need to ask them. Right. And what other people think about me is none of my business. I need to, row my own boat, stay in my lane, and focus on what I need to do. And so I think I don't like it when people are utilizing tools, which are really amazing, helpful tools of self-discovery to try to sort of spy on someone else to be, that feels a little bit icky to me.
Well, yeah. And then they become, because you've used this word several times, then they become tools. because when you were originally talking about astrology and you had the question if somebody says, well, would you believe in that stuff? And you use the example of a birthday. And I always think, but what you've talked about for the last 5 minutes is the tarot, astrology. These are tools that you use. So somebody saying, do you believe in it is like saying, do you believe in a screwdriver? It's like, right. It's not a system of belief. It's actually a tool that gets used. And if you find it useful, then use it. And if you don't find it useful, then don't use it. But a variety of people find, that, like, I love that too, that I think, Kelly and I, we just might do the same thing around communication and whatnot. Pull out, she can pull the charts out. We'll pull the tarot deck out and we'll use that whole vast knowledge of both of those systems to try and get some work. Or the next time you and I and Steve and Kelly get together, let's bring 4 charts and some tarot decks and have some great conversations.
If you want a mediator,
I was going to say,
I can come as a mediator.
Join us.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think it's, I think there's so much great, it can be so helpful. And it makes me laugh when people ask about like, oh, do you believe in this? Right. And I've had clients who, they're like, well, I'm not sure I believe in this. And I'm like, well, you're paying me. So, it's not my job to convince you. It's my job to share the wisdom of your chart. And whether you take it or not, that's up to you. But again, if you're paid for this, so there must be some part of you that feels that it's a useful tool.
Right.
And again, that's pretty rare. It's I've only had maybe 2 people come on who are basically like real skeptics and prove it to me. I'm like, okay, let's talk about Saturn. Well, those cycles are so obvious that it's like, well, and Saturn's basically going to knock you over with a 2x4. So if you didn't notice what was happening and the enormous invitation to grow, then wow, there's not a lot. I'm not going to be able to share much more with you.
That I thought about this just yesterday because I was speaking with somebody and they had mentioned like going to see a psychic and being like, okay, no, you tell me, like I'm paying you. So you tell me what I'm supposed to know. But I'm like, people so number one, you're right. They're paying for something. Why are they there? And if it's like, you have something to prove to me, deep down, I think those people have trust issues.
Probably.
Like, I think we can boil it down to like, you don't trust what you're doing, but you're still paying for it. So like, what is it that you're looking for? So I think there's a deeper, something else is going on there with people that are so skeptical, but still willing to do something to prove something. So it's funny that I just encountered that.
Yeah, that's an odd one.
Yeah.
It's a strange perspective to take.
I would agree. Mm-hmm. I would agree. And it's not, then you're not using anything as a tool there. Then it's either you're setting out to prove something. There's a hidden agenda. I've never encountered a client who's been skeptical from the client perspective, but questions around the belief of, and it was actually James Wells, who, we'll have as a guest, who's always been a mentor of mine. And his comment was, it is not a system of belief. It's not about belief. And I'm not going to try and convince you whether or not the tool is a valuable one. If you think it's valuable, you'll use it. And if you think that I'm a valuable resource for you to use the tool, then you'll book some time with me. And otherwise, you'll go somewhere else. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, Bonnie, when you talk about like the trust issue, I think that's true. I think there's a fundamental, humans want to know, like, how's it all going to turn out? That's really what they're asking is, am I going to be okay? And I guess part of it for me is like, listen, this is the cyclical nature of being a human on this planet. And we are not here just to be happy. That's not what we signed up for. And for me, part of using these tools is not to try to understand how it's all going to turn out in the end. It's just help guide me on the next right step I need to take. And that's, that to me is where tarot is so helpful. And that's my personal practice is like, what energy do I need to work with today? So, that's part of I think that's what part of its the most beautiful part of its gift is to help us just stay present. Mm-hmm. And what do I need to engage with right now?
Now, can I ask you a follow? Sorry, no, go ahead, Bonnie. Go.
No, you go ahead.
We're gonna do our Canadian chip it down. No, you go. No, please, by all means, after you.
So Libra rising, Bonnie. No, after you. No, you first.
I don't. but the question I had was related, but again, because you talked about the idea of using tarot as a way of looking at the energy. And I guess my question is, as versed as you are in astrology, do you then combine the two? Because I always think that, the tarot's a great, it kind of says, what does that energy look like now? And then astrology could be a very good tool of, well, when would I do this? So, so I'm curious as to whether or not your practice blends kind of the what, that idea of first step, because I agree with you. I think the tarot is a phenomenal tool for kind of helping us get unstuck when we don't know where to go. But that astrology works so well with that when. And again, I'm curious to see if you blend those two modalities in that way.
So I try to. I didn't know initially that the tarot had associations with, like, that every card has an astrological association. And so that was mind blowing. And so I very quickly asked for a book from Liz Dean for Christmas, all about, which included the astrological association of each card. And so I don't know all of them. I have to look them up. And sometimes I forget. And, but what I find in my personal practice is that I find the tarot really reflects what's happening in the astrology. And so it's sort of like this mirror, and it's like, oh, yeah. So, and again, everybody's in different cycles because we all have the zodiac in different parts of our chart. So for example, like Mars retrograde, which we've had Mars in Cancer basically on and off since September, but Cancer shows up in a different spot for all of us. So for some people, it might be challenge and frustration around home and family. Other people, it's going to be around career, maybe relationships. So everybody, it's, somewhere different for everyone. And so, it's funny because the astrology for me since the beginning of this year has been very sticky and slow and frustrating. And I feel like a lot of my pulls have reflected that. And I'm starting to feel that since the sun shifted into Aries last week with the spring equinox, of course, that is like this resurgence. The sun is in its exaltation, its favorite position of the zodiac in Aries. And we can all feel that in the Northern Hemisphere. We feel the strength coming back to the sun and everything. The birds are singing and things are starting to, slowly, like spring is starting to like show its promise. And I feel that lift. And it's funny because the cards I'm pulling also seem to reflect that. Like I didn't have a chance to I usually pull my cards in the morning, and I didn't have a chance to pull till the end of the day. And I pulled the Ace of Wands and Three of Cups, which I was like, oh, thank you. Yay. And again, I've been getting a lot of sort of yes cards. Whereas earlier, like in February, I'm like, the Tower, the Devil, all
the fives coming.
Oh my God. Exactly. And like lots of reversals and, seeing things or like the Hermit, the High Priestess, like it was like energy of going within, retreat. It's not time to be out there. And so I do find that's how I notice, like I do notice that it seems to reflect, at least for me. And again, so, it's interesting. Like I haven't done this, but I wonder if I pulled a card for a client before we started, to see if that sort of would be reflected about the cycle they're in.
Well, does
that answer your question?
Yeah, it totally does. Cause I and you talked about the Ace of Wands and the Three of Cups. And it's so funny with the idea of the Three of Cups. I'm like, the word exaltation, and I know that the connection to like the astrological connection to the Three of Cups wouldn't sit in either, Aries or fire, but that word of exaltation certainly does. Like you could see that concept of celebration sitting there. And then I think, well, the Ace of Wands is literally the element of fire. Like, we talk about, Aries, that's your first step straight into, kind of the element of fire. So to me, I always look at those sort of connections. In some way, you're drawing a card that has a connection to either the current astrology or maybe to a cycle that's coming up in your chart. And they, as you said, they very often speak to one another, right? you know, I'd be hard pressed to think of a greater yes card than the Ace of Wands, right? Like,
oh, totally.
yeah.
It was so like, I was like, oh, yay. Thank you. I mean, I do try to, actually it was Bonnie who really helped me look at the tower in a different way. And also I had a reading with like a couple of years ago with a wonderful tarot reader from Spain. She's actually British, but lives in Spain, Gaynor Carrillo. And she also, you know, of course, because whenever I pull the tower, my heart skips a beat. I'm like, I'm not ready, you know, because it's that like, oh no. And she's like, no, like it's talking about a necessary, and Bonnie, that was your approach too. She's like, no, the tower is, you know what, something needs to, you know, be demolished because something new needs to be built. So what in your life, and it's, if we can be really honest with ourselves on, you know, what isn't serving me anymore. And it doesn't have to be huge. It could be like, oh, maybe having sugar doesn't serve me anymore. Maybe drinking too much caffeine, maybe not moving my body. It doesn't have to be like, this person's going to die. It's, you know, we're like, I look at the tower or death and you sort of see like it's this go to the worst fear, but it's not necessarily that. So it's good to, I think it's important to like, keep an open perspective to what I mean. And even like, I love the Ace of Wands. It's definitely a yes card, but it's not necessarily like, it can be a yes to something small. Like It can be a yes to like, oh yes, you're doing this great podcast with Peter and Bonnie tomorrow. You know, that could be, and here we are, the Three of Cups, the three of us.
Yeah. And
So,
you know, and yeah, it may also have, because I always think there's a downside to every card as well, right? The idea that, you know, the Ace of Wands is it's elemental fire, but it's missing three other elements too. So, you know, there's some, it might not have the compassion that's needed.
Oh, stop talking, Scorpio.
I know. Sorry.
it's that whole, it's
I'm just
like the
kidding.
sign.
I have like the sunny side, and Peter's
Totally.
like, yeah, but
Well,
there's this.
It's
The dark
and the
side.
same, right? Like when you talked about, because this is the one thing I find I love doing the podcast with Bonnie is that you talk about her approach to a card like the Tower, and you know, she'll always kind of, she's like, you know, she'll say, oh, Peter, you have, because I have spent a lot more time, like from a calendar perspective with the tarot, but I learned so much from Bonnie's perspective on so many cards. And the Tower, you know, the Tower would definitely be one of them. She actually, I think, you know, introduced me to the term, you know, oh, that's a Tower moment. And I'm like, what a brilliant turn of phrase, right? Because we all have them, and some of them are big and some of them are small. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the same way, I see actually, again, when I talk to people about their astrology charts, it's like, okay, so, you know, how do you experience the energy of Capricorn? And I always talk about the high road of a sign, the low road of a sign, and then the highest expression, which is the aspiration. You know, this is the, you know, what's the best part of this? So I like that the two, both, modalities have that sort of, they incorporate the dark and the light. It's all, everything has yin and yang, you know, it's that beautiful invitation of understanding like the light in the darkness and the darkness in the light. So.
And you know, I was teasing you, Peter, right?
Oh, I know. But I'm gonna look. See, I can't talk now. My mouth's gonna be full of my soda water.
No, I agree. And I think that's so important too when we approach the tarot, because there are those cards that are like, "Ooh, really? Like that's like I've been notoriously pulling like really difficult cards lately, and I'm like, really, what's going on with me that I'm pulling these? But I do, you know, like I it's not like toxic positivity where like everything is, you know, rainbows and unicorns, but it's kind of like, what lesson can we learn from that card, you know, to support us? Because if we look at everything as doom and gloom, that makes us a victim. So, you know, what can we do with that energy, even though it might really suck, to like help us move away from that? And for sure, like the Ace of Wands could be, you're blocking that energy. Like someone's handing you a magic wand and you're like, yeah, no, I'm good. Thanks. Right.
I want to change. Yeah.
I want to change.
You see that all the time in people's charts. Like I have several planets in my chart, which are in poor condition zodiacally. So they're in detriment, or fall. And I'll see people's charts where half the planets are in like exaltation or in rulership. So they're really powerful planets. And I have I have planet envy right now. But, you know, or you see people with grand trines and, you know, all this, what we would say as astrologers, oh, this is ease. This is things are just flowing naturally and this should just be like doors opening and opportunity. And, you know, I've seen people who have that and it's not necessarily working for them. And even though it should be all this opportunity, they're not, there's no motivation to sort of do anything with it or to change. Whereas, you know, you've got more difficult conversations between planets. There is motivation to change. And so I think, you know, we don't want to bypass and go right into the like, oh, you know, what's the lesson here? If somebody's experiencing pain and suffering, I want to offer them compassion and grace and ask how I can help them move through this difficult cycle. And hopefully down the road, they may be at a place then where we can explore, okay, what was the lesson? What did you take away from this time? But we don't want to try to get there too fast. And I think that happens a lot, but it is like I had one astrology teacher and oh my goodness, like such everything, super negative perspective. And it was like, really, I feel like that to me speaks to the fate versus free will. And, you know, that fate and destiny are different. And, you know, that we like this, these are the cards we're dealt, but this is what I could do with that energy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly. It makes me think, I know that when my wife teaches some of her courses, she will always use chart examples of people who are exceptionally successful in their field and yet have some challenging placements because, you know, it's the question of, oh, well, I can't do that because my chart says blah, blah, blah. In the same way, oh, well, you know what? Yeah, of course this is going to happen negatively because I've just pulled the Tower and the Devil and the 10 of Swords and the 10 of Wands. And it's like, well, okay, but that's providing a ton of agency to the chart or to the deck as opposed to taking the agency into yourself and saying, well, what is this telling me? And then what can I do to move forward? So
yeah, can you be really honest with yourself about, like, you know, one of my like I think such a clear one is the Eight of Swords, right? Like, how am I holding myself prisoner? Like, how am I prisoner to my thoughts, right? And how can I liberate myself? Because if I just take the blindfold off and I can walk right through, you know, and that, so I think there's a lot of, again, I like to be clear, I always shudder when I see the Three of Swords, the 10 of Swords, and then I'm like, okay, take some deep breaths. What do I need to learn from this? Where am I experiencing some heartache? And, you know, again, it doesn't necessarily mean, it can be a lot of different things. So yeah, I think there's a keeping perspective, not going too dark, not going, it's all the Libra balance. It's all balance, right?
Exactly. So that brings us to like the part of the episode where we like to pull cards. So I think this is a perfect segue into that since we've been sort of talking about, you know, what happens when a particular card shows up. Do you want to join us, Naomi? We, at the end of our episodes, we each pull a card. You're invited to join us and pick whatever deck you'd like to pick.
I would love to. And I have to just show you. So this is my Cosmic Alchemy deck. And you'll notice it's in its own little sleeping bag, which Bonnie makes. Correct. And I love, my cards love their little snuggly bag. I love this because then it has this beautiful.
You're so cute.
I love it. Yeah. So and all of my decks have their own little sleeping bags. And can you tell I have 4 planets in Scorpio, all the red and black?
I know, it's funny because when I brought the different, you know, designs, I was like, oh, do I bring this one? And then Naomi's like, I want that one. I'm like, okay. So I love that.
Love the dark. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I so relate to that. So, yeah, so I'm shuffling from my Cosmic Alchemy deck, which is not a tarot deck.
Oh, yay.
This again was the creation of my friend Debbie. And I just love this deck because it is, if you're curious about astrology, you want to understand it, it's a really great tool. And look at the card that flew out of the deck. We have a jumper.
Okay.
And the card is Cancer.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
So I love Cancer. Cancer is the home of the moon. And Cancer energy is compassionate and nurturing. Cancer understands that its sensitivity is a beautiful gift, even though in our toxic consumerist patriarchy. It doesn't always get rewarded as such. And Cancer shows up somewhere different for all of us. And Cancer for me is my midheaven. And so midheaven is the public part of our chart. It's the where we receive our gifts and accolades. It's our career, our vocation, our calling. And we've had Mars in Cancer, which has created we're really working hard in that area of life right now. And so I think this is the perfect card for me because this was, a very intuitive, like nice flowing conversation. And it's for me, the fact that it is a visibility thing because I'm here being your guest on a podcast, which is definitely a 10th house activity. So that's where your midheaven is. It's the gateway to the 10th house. So that feels perfect timing. Thank you. Thank you, Cosmic Alchemy deck.
I was going to say, though, Cancer on the midheaven as well. It's interesting considering what you do for work also.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It was one of those, and the ruler of my midheaven is my moon in Virgo, which is very by the book detail oriented. You see all the certifications behind me. That's very Virgo moon. It's just so, it's so interesting when we understand what those little elements of our chart and how it's working. And am I expressing this when we talk to people who really are not fulfilled in the work they're doing? And it's like, I can help you with that because you may not be honoring your true calling. So let's explore.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I love that. I have nothing to add because I don't know anything about Cancer.
Yeah, I don't.
There's some signs I can talk about. Cancer isn't. I mean, I know where it is, but like in terms of where it shows up, but I don't really know anything about Cancer, so I'm always learning. Thank you, Neil.
But because I always think Cancer is one of those cards that its association with the tarot. I always think it's one of those ones where you're like, really, because it's the Chariot. Interestingly enough, and I'm like, anyways, because. To me, I always think Cancer, it's water sign. I have my moon in Cancer, so I was thinking for all the Scorpio, it's sort of, softens. And my wife laughs because my office is sort of set up like my second home where I'm sort of almost cocooned into my work. It's like I just want to be that nice blanket of embrace. But then...
Is that like being in the shell?
Yes,
exactly.
Is that what that means?
That's exactly it. And it's one of the reasons, and you probably heard me do it on previous podcast episodes, why I talk about, sometimes we talk about the Chariot and the movement. Cancer sometimes causes that movement to almost be crap-like, right? So it's not necessarily forward movement. It's kind of sometimes that side-to-side movement. And then, of course, it's a water sign. So anything kind of linked to the cups or, any of that water stuff as well in the tarot deck. So I have nothing to add either other than providing some of those tarot connections. So
I would also connect, so to me, it also makes me think about the High Priestess because the High Priestess is intuitive.
Correct.
It's that and that is Cancer's very intuitive. It just sort of deep knowledge, that going within and trusting the intuitive guidance we're getting.
Yeah. And her card, of course, is the moon, which, has that Cancer, that Cancer link. So yeah, fabulous. Bonnie, I was shuffling and I shuffle and draw and then put it down because I don't want to be distracted by what our guest has to say. So I'm ready, or you're ready, whichever one you like.
Okay, I'll go. How's that? I'll make a decision. I'm going to prove Naomi wrong, and I'm going to go against the grain of that Libra rising and be like, no, I'll go now. Are you proud of me? Okay.
Yes, Queen of Swords. There we go.
Oh my God.
Oh,
Queen of Swords.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is also part of my astrology. Like, this card is linked to me on a personal level. Oh my God. Okay. See, you can't make this up. How many times do I say that on this podcast?
Wow.
I'm using the Earth Woman Tarot by Tarn Ellis, and I pulled the Queen of Swords, which is funny. Sorry.
No, you drew it as she mentioned the word, as she said Queen of Swords. You were literally, just getting ready to put it up.
Yeah, because I had it. I'd flipped it over and I was waiting. Same with you. Like, I shuffled, I flipped it over and I'm like, okay, I'll wait till I talk about it. So when she said Queen of Swords, I'm like, oh my God, that's my card, which is also my card astrologically because of whatever. Like, I know it's justice, but it's also Queen of Swords. Oh my God, I can't even talk about this card right now. I'm like, okay. So the Queen of Swords, and I think I talked to you about this, Naomi, in my your reading was so incredible for me, and it gave me so much insight. But I often wondered, I'm like, wow, okay, Queen of Swords is part of, my astrological makeup through the tarot, but I don't really associate with the Queen of Swords because I don't well, in the past, I've had difficulty speaking my truth and being true to who I am and sort of having that, knowing that I do have a lot of knowledge and wisdom in this, and I can sort of do that in this compassionate leadership way, but never giving myself the permission to communicate that. So when I see the Queen of Swords, and she's very, in traditional terms, can be quite harsh and cold. And in here, it's a beautiful image. It's like it's winter. She's wearing this beautiful white dress. So that's the depiction in this card. But I'm like, I'm not a cold person. I don't have a cutting sort of way of communicating. So why am I so much like the Queen of Swords? But what I think I need to learn from that card is because she's a queen, there's this compassionate aspect to her, this nurturing aspect. And I resonate very deeply with that. And what she is here to teach me is to use my voice and to live my truth and to sort of own that in a way that's compassionate and nurturing and sort of, not cold. So and she's also smart. She's like the smartest queen and she's the bravest queen. And I'm like, okay, I'm pretty smart. I'm working on my bravery, but she's like a badass in the tarot. And that's the part that I need to, or that I choose to sort of harness that energy and bring more of that into my life. So that's kind of my take on myself for the Queen of Swords. I know there's so much more interpretation we could go down that road, but since we're talking astrology and sort of personal connection with the cards, I'm gonna talk about it in that respect. So if anybody has anything to add.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's wild that I said that and that was your card. We didn't plan that. But so to me, I know the Queen of Swords is associated with Virgo and Libra. And I love her no nonsense. She's like, look, we just need to get to this. And there's like such mastery with the queens, but yet anyway, I love the queens. And to me, if you, from an astrological perspective, so just to add to that, Libra is the sign of Saturn's exaltation. So Saturn is an honored guest in the sign of Libra. And so Saturn can be a very difficult energy for us to work with. And Saturn cycles are really challenging. And where do we want to see Saturn at its absolute best? In Libra? Because Saturn knows that, me thriving as an individual doesn't matter if all of us don't have a chance to thrive. It's accepting responsibility. That's the, sort of the coming into right relationship with ourselves so we can be in right relationship with others. And so I think that you can lean into that, like making that association of Saturn and Saturn's lessons with the Queen of Swords. So that's how I would connect the two.
It's fabulous.
Thank you.
Yeah. The only thing I would add would be, we talked about the Cancer card that had shown up, and I would, because I see the Queen of Swords as the warrior queen. And I think, there's a significant leadership. There's no nonsense, no BS, real decisiveness. But it happens in a space of compassion. It happens in water-based space, right? Because the queen, is sort of the rank of the tarot that sits in the element of water. And then I think of, and I don't want to get political, but I think of some of the stuff that is happening now. If the Queen of Swords could just take over for a while.
Agreed.
Right? There's been enough king energy for quite some time. Let's just clean the slate of that, and let's put the Queen of Swords in charge in a couple of different spots. That to me, I think would be, I don't know. There's a personification of leadership for others, compassionate leadership, but decisiveness that really does sit inside that Queen of Swords. So it has been a card I've reflected on because, Bonnie knows I kind of like that King of Cups sort of leadership energy, but that Queen of Swords has a little bit more cut than the King of Cups does. So That's, you know, that's all.
Yeah, but she's not cruel, that's for sure. You know, it's not, she's a warrior. And actually, that's so funny because we've just recently had Venus Cazimi the sun, which is so Venus came into the heart of the sun, and she is going to rise as the morning star, which is the warrior star. And I have Venus morning star in my chart, and that energy is so resonant for me. But again, can you be a leader? She's not cruel. She still has compassion. But yeah, but she's still holding a sword.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's fun. Listening to you, Naomi, talk about astrology. It's like I'm hearing the voice of my wife and my wife's podcast kind of going through my head.
Well, that's like the biggest compliment ever, because she is like a huge inspiration for me. I am a big fan.
Big fan. Okay. Well, that's, yeah. I mean, yeah, because it's like, because there is that, anyways, that, you know, yeah. So I have also drawn a card. And although not the wow Queen of Swords, when we were talking about the idea of Cancer, it's water in every card. So I went a little bit different. I mean, I've used this deck before. I used the Gaian Tarot deck by Joanna Colbert Powell, who I'm going to cross my fingers and hope at some point in time will come on as a guest, but is re-releasing the Gaian Tarot next month in April of 2025. I've talked about this deck because it is, other than the Rider-Waite-Smith, it has been my favorite deck for quite some time. And I drew the Seven of Water, which is the equivalent of the Seven of Cups. So, you know, when I think about this particular card, I think, you know, it talks about a bunch of things, right? It talks about our intuition. It talks about our emotion, but it talks about choice. That here's this person who has all of these, you know, shiny, lovely cups sitting in front of them, and they don't know which one to pick from. And you were talking, Naomi, about Saturnian energy, and I think this card really can benefit from, and this is where I think, you know, the tarot comes in nicely with guidance, is when I'm faced with this card, sometimes what it's saying is just bloody well pick one. They all look nice. They're all pretty. They're lovely colors. We don't know what's inside them, but we're sure whatever happens to be in there is great. Go with your heart. Go with your gut. Trust your intuition, and pick a cup. Pick an experience. Choose something, and understand as well that, you know, by choosing one, you may be also, you know, placing kind of boundaries around the other. By saying, you know, yes to one means I might be saying no to some of the other choices. And that's okay. That's okay. It might also be, when we get a card like the Seven of Water, the Seven of Cups, it might not be a hard no to all the other options. It might be a not right now or a not yet. But, you know, it might be my gut, my heart, my intuition, those water-like feelings are saying that, you know, this is what I need to do at this point, and trust that. So it's when I see a card like the Seven of Water, and like I said, this is a person who's already been in the process of, they've made that choice. So I always think sometimes that card is a reminder that, you know, we're faced with all of these choices, and we do have a feeling about what direction we want to go in. And the card says, trust that feeling and go in that direction. So that's, and of course it's water. So it's linked to Cancer. It's linked to the Queen part of the Queen of Swords. We're going to draw those three cards together. Anybody else around the Seven of Water card?
Yeah, I as a self-proclaimed person who has a hard time making decisions, when I see that card, I'm like, really? Okay, thank you. I do see it in a couple of different ways. 100%. It's like you are being presented with seven, like you have a lot of options here. So it's not a bad thing because you get to make a choice. And why are you making that choice? So when you're looking at what's presented in front of you, I agree with you, Peter. It's like, follow your heart, follow your gut. Like, and that might not be the easiest choice, right? Like it's things that are presented to us. And sometimes we just want to make that easy choice because it's easy. But sometimes what's really aligned with our desire can be a difficult choice. So it's really knowing what is best for you. And I think with this card, you really have to go within and really sort of tap into that emotional, intuitive, heart-based energy. I also think that it's a card that is giving you permission to enjoy, right? Because a lot of times we are offered these opportunities for pleasure, right? Like if we think about cups and flow and love and emotions and relationships, right? Like those are kind of like good feelings, but we don't allow ourselves to pick things maybe that bring us joy because we're burdened or whatever it is, that we're experiencing at that time. So it's a couple of things. It's like knowing you have a lot of choice in front of you, which is a good thing. Really aligning with why you're picking that thing. And it could be just for the sheer pleasure of it, or it could be like, this is what really aligns with me, although it might be hard. And giving yourself permission to have pleasure, right? And like, you could just be wanting, to go out and have a good time, and that's okay too. So that's it's kind of a complicated card for me. It seems easy about like you've got a lot of choice, but when we really go deep and figure out like why are we actually making that choice, that can sometimes make it a little bit more difficult. And it'd be interesting to see what other cards would show up in a reading for you. Like, is this a choice about something material based? Is this a choice about like the mind, or like, is this the course I have to take? So sometimes other cards in the spread can help you make that decision. So that's my take on the Seven of Cups.
I love that. But I love that you highlighted the idea of choices that give us pleasure. And sometimes we forget that can actually be a determining factor to, I want to do it because it's going to bring me some joy. Linking back to, Naomi had talked about the idea of Venus and that sense of joy and pleasure. Anything else? You've got.
I'll weigh in on that one. So I think to me that also speaks to there are no wrong choices, because when you look at the image, like the traditional Seven of Cups, it's like the fairy favors or whatever. There's all these like, oh, that looks so amazing. What do I pick? Do I want the dragon, or do I want, and so I think, I like the idea that there are no wrong choices. This is just life, and we're going to experience and learn and grow. And we don't have to look at failure as a setback. It's more, we fail so that we can grow and evolve. And I also think it speaks to the astrology of right now, with both Venus and Mercury are still in their retrograde. So it's very introspective. And the three cards that we've all chosen are it's introspective. And yet that Queen of Swords is saying, make a decision. So I actually think all three of the cards that we picked are all good. And also for Peter, graduated from Saturn school today.
Right.
That is very much like, okay. And so Saturn is he's got his eye on the clock. It's, you are here for this limited time. Live your purpose. What are you doing? Stop wasting time, accept responsibility, and understand that all of your actions have consequences. So to me, if you've been contemplating a choice, this card is like, okay, you're done and go.
I actually thank you for that, because I just realized I'm the person who drew the card. So I never think of I'm always like, oh, well, what does the card mean? But you're absolutely right, considering, the power of that Saturn transit that's happening. That was probably a pretty good card to draw.
Yeah.
Thank you for your perspective on that. I appreciate that's going to give me some food for thought now as I go into my deep Scorpio self. So
exactly. Peeling away the next layer.
Yep.
Oh, I know, so many layers. I think that the image of we're an onion and we have all these layers. I'm so tired of listening to that, because I'm like, how many freaking layers do I have to go through? I'm done peeling the onion, right? Like I don't want to keep doing that anymore. So.
I know. Shrek, stop it.
Yes. So Naomi, how can people find you? And do you have anything upcoming that you'd like to share?
I do. So the best way to find me is at my website, naomisimpsonastrology.com. And all my links to social media, et cetera, are there. So I'm on Instagram at Naomi Simpson Astrology, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And I do have an online event, so I'll share that. It is on Wednesday, April the 23rd. It is called Communicate to Connect. It's all about relationship communication. And I actually, Bonnie audited one of my workshops last week, so I'm
was
offering it
awesome.
again. Thank you. So I'm offering it again, and it's for any type of communication issues that you're struggling with. So whether it's personal or professional, and we focus on sort of three main areas to help develop some skills that you can, and you leave with practical things you can start using right away. So that I try to make sure you get the most bang for your buck. And of course, I always am available for astrology consults as well. I still have my 2025 shorter reading. I don't usually do that reading. I usually only keep it for a couple, like the first 6 weeks of the year. But because this is such a sort of really big astrology year, I have people reaching out still going, can we please look at the astrology for the year? So I'm going to leave that on for maybe a couple more weeks. But then I can do just regular consults. I love connecting with people over their horoscopes.
Great.
And you're so good at it.
Thank you.
I'm going to have to explore that, as odd as that might sound, considering I got an astrologer living in the house. She's pretty big. And she doesn't take new clients. So, I mean, I would, she probably wouldn't do a reading with me. So I think, Naomi, I just might reach out and
I would love that.
Get a consult. So thank you. Bonnie, how about you?
Excellent.
What do you got?
How about me?
Yeah, what do you got coming up, going on, and where can people find you?
The best place to find me is my website, which is breathewithbonnie.com. I would encourage you to sign up for my newsletter. I send out any types of events that I'm hosting will always come through my newsletter, not always on my social media. So what do I have coming up? I started a new series called The Soul's Journey, Meet the Majors. And every month I go through a different card of the major arcana. We started with the Fool this month we did the Magician. And next month we'll be diving into the High Priestess energy. So if you're interested in that, they're not on my website right now, but maybe by the time this podcast launches, I'll have it up. But again, if you'd like to sign up for my newsletter, I send out any events that I have coming up. I also send out an intention of the month. So that's really the best way to stay connected with me is through my website and my newsletter. I am on Instagram at Breathe with Bonnie. So how about you, Peter?
Well, first I will say I attended the Magician workshop, and I am extremely excited for the High Priestess coming next month. So if you haven't gone to check out Bonnie's monthly workshops, highly, highly, highly recommend. So,
oh wow! Thank you.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic, and still has me thinking about. It was funny because you drew the Queen of Swords, which was a card that I drew as part of the workshop as well. So there was a ton of insight there. For me, look, Naomi mentioned my wife, so I'm going to actually do the same. Not that she needs promotion from me here, since she has a global practice. But for those of you who are listening who don't know, my wife is Kelly Surtees. So Kelly's Astrology Podcast is a weekly podcast. She provides a wealth of information in astrology. She's been doing this for a long time. She offers all kinds of courses. Her website is kellysastrology.com. I'm not stepping on Naomi's toes because she doesn't take any new clients. So she has a budding client base and isn't taking any new clients. So for those of you looking for astrology consults, we got somebody right here to be
local.
So I just thought, since from time to time I've talked about my wife as an astrologer, for those of you who aren't aware, probably a good idea for me to say, exactly, who she is.
She's a pretty big deal for those of you who don't know.
She
and a great astrologer.
She's pretty good at what she does. So I think her podcast is a great place to discover her, as are some of her courses, all available on her website. We'll put that in the show notes as well. I'll add in the show notes, or Bonnie will add in the show notes where to find me. But yeah, other than that, Naomi, I want to say a huge thank you. We just met prior to recording this episode, and maybe it's all the shared, the fact that we have a bunch of Scorpio in our charts, but I feel like I've, not only did we add a guest, but I feel like I've made an acquaintance and a friend here. So I want to thank you for taking the time for joining us, and then I'll turn it over to Bonnie to kind of, do the same and sort of sign off. But I wanted to make sure that I could offer that here to you as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed my time with you guys. It went by so fast.
It does. It goes by so quickly, right?
I know.
But yeah, just to echo what Peter said, thank you so much for being here, Naomi. You are my personal friend, and it's been such a pleasure to have you on. And you're such a wealth of knowledge. So I'm always learning things from you, even though you're not teaching me something. Just by the way you're speaking, I'm always absorbing your wisdom. So we'd like to thank everyone here for tuning into Tarot with Peter and Bonnie. If you liked our podcast, please comment, leave, a nice comment. You can share it with other people who are curious about tarot and even today about astrology. I think there was a lot of great information that people could absorb there. So please share, comment. If you have something that you'd like us to talk about on an upcoming episode, please share that with us. And we thank you. We do this because we love it and we want to share it with you. So until next time on Tarot with Bonnie and Peter, we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.